if I even mention, hey, I don't feel as great as you all are cheering up of positivity, I feel there's a fakery in positivity nowadays. I don't think it's healthy, she's saying. I don't think it's really healthy for anyone just to be walked on fire and ignore what you feel. My point is, I'm trying to translate it.
Sure.
My point is, how what would you, Shanti, recommend in a group of Facebook where everything feels so perfected, so crafted
Mhm.
towards creating idols in the groups, and that you have to behave like the idols in the group that are all perfect, positive, and seem to have it all together. I feel out of alignment. I feel out of the sense of togetherness. There's something off. She says, I'm not gonna be the naysayer, the ones that bring anyone down in the group, but I feel that everybody in these groups that I am, she doesn't want to mention where,
Mhm.
but in the groups that I am, people sacrifice their identity to become the identity of someone they follow. I'm not sure if I'm translating
No,
well, but
I know, but you don't have to. I understand completely the
okay.
question.
Okay, perfect.
Well,
Go
one of
for
them is
it.
what would I do, and if it was irritating me enough, I would leave.
Yes,
Second is I hear you, and in not just in a place where only one way of being is acceptable, I don't feel safe
yes.
to be everything that I am.
Mm.
Because I'm not always great and wonderful. Well, I am always great, but sometimes I'm angry and sometimes I'm sad and sometimes I'm in deep grief. What the fuck isn't great about that?
I love you.
But if I'm
Yeah.
in a place where it's, and I have a very personal experience of this currently, I tend to be a fly on the wall. I tend to look and withhold myself unless I feel like interacting. And when I feel the judgments, I validate it and then I move on with my life. I don't let it eat me alive. That's also not a really good place to be. Right. And if you're in a big group of people, I happen to be one that has about 4,000 people, you're not going to change anybody's mind.
Exactly.
Just either leave, observe, or stay and just be you and let people react the way they react
Yes.
and make your
Agree.
own safety in that.
Mm.
Those are the options. There really isn't anything about change or seek out another environment where the totality of human experience is not only welcomed, but also held cleanly. Because you don't want to wind up in a group where everybody's bitching and complaining.
Exactly.
That's also not healthy.
Mm. I think that's an answer, and that's like, and I think that's a great share right now, Shanti, for everyone. There's so much information, so many groups, so many such things, and that which brings me to the next question. A gentleman, his name is Fernando. He actually lives in Sweden and is from Mexico. Interesting. He's in that side of the world. He said, "I find myself. I'm a very positive." Man, I've been doing the inner work for a lot of time, shadow work, trauma work. I've taken responsibility for me. I've tried to correct all of my, he said misdemeanors, but in my mistakes, make amends with people. I'm trying to be a responsible look at it. That will be our next podcast. A mature adult. However, I'm finding a really challenging time right now with the pandemic, the viruses, the vaccines, and all the narratives to deal in my heart with not only the misinformation that people, rightfully so, he said, are receiving, but I find a really challenging time with the governments and with the way information is being put out there for humanity to behold. If Shanti has anything to say about this, I would love to hear her. I appreciated your last podcast with her very, very much. It gave me, it opened a window inside of me to see more of me in a different way and to accept myself even more. And with that, to say no more often. Interesting. But he wants to know more, like, he's having a challenge of, he said that the way that information is being put, and you and I have talked about this,
Yeah.
it's hurting his heart. He says, it pains me. It really pains me. So if Shanti can bring light to this, I will be appreciative of that.
Well, I see the mature view in life as looking at the whole thing
Mm,
and choosing how you will respond. The
mm.
maturity is looking at the environment and responding to it appropriately by your own standards, not by somebody else's.
Yes.
And knowing that there are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 different viewpoints that all have validity,
Mm,
that are allowed to exist because they do. And to find what yours is that keeps you well,
mm.
that keeps you honest, that keeps you transparent with yourself. I've noticed in lots of conversations that people are hesitant, even now, to talk about the whole thing, where their stance is, with good reason, because at some point someone's been attacked for their perspective. And I like to be the place where people can say whatever they need to say and talk about it and lean in and give a little push back and forth, but never with disrespect. Always with an eye to connect. We need to be connecting right now, not disconnect.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
just like being willing to like hear even people we think are wrong. Be willing to sit and listen.
Mm.
Just listen. People are
Oh,
struggling right now, and people.
yeah.
I'm going to say this. It's what I did with my group last year. It's a fact. We are living in unusual times.
Mm.
So we're going to feel unusual.
Yes.
And it's about accepting this feels really weird.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean it's bad or wrong. But it is what it is. It's weird. And yeah,
It
I
is
mean,
weird.
especially right now as things change, there's some governments that are like, all measures are off. It's like every single day it's something different because of the Omicron.
Yes.
And for me, I always said in the beginning, there's going to come a point where we just have to live side by side with this virus.
Yes. Yeah,
And
you've said it since the beginning,
yeah,
Shanti, since the beginning.
yeah. Since it's like this is gonna be a bit of a shit show because nobody knows what they're doing. And I mean by nobody, I mean governments. And we have to watch and see. And now we're hitting that point where they're like, oh, and some of them are having a really hard time, like stepping back and being like, okay, let's do this. Everyone wants to pretend like they know what's happening. Nobody knows what's happening.
Nobody knows.
Nobody
Nobody
knows.
knows.
No, nobody knows. And we won't know for a while. Even if we go back forward and look back statistically, we won't have all the answers. They were living in unusual times. These are the two things of our current time that are really hard for a Western-minded thinker. The first one. It is very difficult to plan into the future.
Wow.
Which means we have to get vulnerable with where we are right now.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
The second is,
yes,
there are no answers.
Boom.
Which means we have to get comfortable without them. Get in that place of like, how am I responding to the current world that I live in? And am I responding to it in a way that brings wellness to me and those around me? Not everywhere, just right here. And living, not being able to plan into the future and living with no answers is actually more natural to our psyches than how we've been trained to think and believe.
Yes.
It's more natural. It's more caring. But it's unusual for a Western-minded thinker. Yes. And the Western mind is a conditioned response, a conditioned reaction response. It's not our natural way of thinking. And when we come into care, we start to think more naturally, which just feels more natural, which means stress becomes less of an ideal situation that we choose. We choose what has me well, because when I'm well, I can help others. If I'm not well, I need to be taking care of myself.
Amen. Absolutely.
And one thing my husband noticed is, for years and years, and even we've been to court with the school system here. Because when my kids are sick, I don't send them to school.
Yes, because you care.
I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah,
And
we're going to
now,
talk about this briefly in a moment because I have something to say about that. Keep going. I'm sorry.
so,
This is so good.
and my husband would get irritated because his workers would come to the office and they were sick. He's like, go home.
Yes.
Like, I don't care. You paid. Go home. Do not be here when you're sick. And so the one of the benefits of right now is that more and more people are actually staying home when they are sick, which makes way more sense.
Mm.
Working at all costs to your own detriment for a company that doesn't care about you is insanity. And even when the company cares about you, sacrificing yourself on behalf makes no sense. But it is what we've been taught to do. And care says, nope, I won't do that anymore. And if I have to, I'm going to do it being kind to myself.
Mm. Wow. Okay, let's talk briefly about this before I have one more last question from someone to wrap it up about the care. But, that's so important. What you just said, it sounds simple, it sounds common sense, but people are not doing it.
Right.
I've heard in the past 2 weeks, and people send me messages, Yvonne, this person came to visit me, they had COVID. And, they didn't tell me until they were here because it was comfortable for them to stay in my house,
Hey,
traveling on planes with the diagnosed. You know what? Where is for me, I get really upset about that
sure.
because I wouldn't do that.
Appropriately so.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that like if I'm coughing, I even cancel at the
Well, I've
dentist
lost
because
friends because I wouldn't go visit. They're like, well, we're sick. And one of my friends said, we're sick and
mm,
my husband's staying home from work. But you guys can still come. I'm like, no, no, I'm not. I don't. Not, and it's not because I'm terrified to get sick. I
no.
just have so much respect for what illness is.
Yes, you have to respect that,
Yes,
and if we can learn from the cues of the animal kingdom, if someone is sick, so, some of the, the lions, they leave behind the sick one so it can heal, or I mean, if it recovers, but it's not leaving it behind because they don't care, it's because they care about the whole tribe. I mean, we need to learn so much from nature or unlearn and just remember, as you said, care is
well,
a
here's
natural thing,
here's the
right?
problem with what the scenario you brought forward.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
the
Yes.
problem with the scenario you brought forward is that by knowing that you have this person, this is a pattern of behavior. So we're going to use it as a metaphor. By
Yes.
knowing that you have a contagious disease and
Yes.
going into somebody's home and not telling them until then, you have robbed them of their own choice.
Oh, woof. I want everybody to listen to this because in the past 2 weeks, I've gotten at least 7 messages, more than that.
Mhm.
People like this person came, or this person jumped into the plane knowing they had the Delta or the Omicron, and just to think about all those families there, to think of, I mean,
They
we,
don't let some, then it takes the other to knowingly. It's something to do it unknowingly. Something else. That's going to happen all over the place. But to do it on purpose means that you take away somebody else's choice. I say this in relationships.
I know.
If you're having sex with someone outside your marriage and you don't have an agreement with your spouse, then your spouse, you have taken the choice away from your spouse.
Wow.
If you have an agreement, then the spouse is in on choosing for themselves if they want that or not. But if it's not an agreement and it's in secret, you rob them of their choice. And that is adolescent behavior. That maturity
Absolutely.
makes sure that in
Yeah,
relating with others, everyone has a choice. And that means
absolutely.
transparency is paramount.
Boom. That's it. You explained it so much better. This boils in my stomach.
Yeah.
I feel my body. It boils. It boils. I would not do that. I can't fathom even the thought of it. And, it's a
Like
challenge for me.
Quinn got COVID. My mother-in-law just had a heart attack recently and she's not immunized. And
Mm.
she was coming for dinner and I said, call her, let her know. Let her decide. We didn't wait till she got here to tell her and see if she would decide. It was like, no, let her decide. She decided not to come. She came later,
Mm.
keeping everybody at choice.
Yes. Yes, now it's different. One of the people said, my cousin has COVID. I tell him to please come. I've been immunized. I had COVID, etc. So I
You're at
chose for him
choice.
to go.